the sport of kings.
Okay,
So,
but they did have a hearing in the House on that issue, and we issued a press release and just said, like, this is great because,
right.
you know, innovation is important, and you know, small business is the font of patents and innovation and invention and all that other good stuff. So, if anything, if they begin to address this in the Congress, this is a good thing from
right.
a competitiveness perspective. But and that will bring us to you. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, AT&T, for sponsoring the From the Hill segment. They've been terrific, and we do appreciate their commitment and support to small business. So,
absolutely.
With that, we'll move over to our core topic on IP and
protecting and harvesting intellectual property.
That's right. But, you know, why don't we just really, really briefly, and we do have viewers who are sort of on, you know, the broad scale. I mean, they've got
right.
patents already. They're looking at, you know, filing a patent or trademark or copyright. Just the basics on, you know, sort of the whole patent and or IP and on the IP front.
Right. Well, let me, just so that everyone's sort of singing from the same hymnal and playing off a level playing field, I'll spend a couple of minutes just giving an overview of intellectual property laws in the U.S., just so everyone has the right terms. I mean, even some of the people that say they're experienced in this field will sometimes mix things up.
And I'm mixing things up, but I can say I'm not experienced.
Well, I'm going to start with an American history quiz.
And I'm going to
see how you do.
Oh,
okay,
gosh.
yeah, this is.
You do this to me, and I'm batting a
your
1,000,
co-host
but
on the spot time,
gosh.
right? We should have maybe a separate sponsor for put the co-host on the spot time.
All right. Am I going to be ejected from my chair if I mess this up?
That would be cool. We'd have to talk to the studio about that feature.
Okay.
So what set of U.S. laws created the patent and copyright laws?
The Constitution.
Ah! There you go. There you go. Article 1, Section 8.
My record.
You are good.
Continuous.
You're good. There's no stumping this co-host.
Okay.
Now, the reason I start with that is we are, to this day, the only country that has intellectual property laws in their Constitution. Think about that. I mean, just take a minute and think about how lucky we are as a country to have that. I mean, we had all these issues to think about when we broke away from the motherland.
That's
all
right.
this stuff on our plate, and pretty high up, Article 1, Section 8, only 7 sections out of it, we wanted to make sure that we preserve the rights of inventors, of artists, of musicians, of people who create things.
Well, thank goodness our founders were all of these things.
I know,
Ben Franklin.
exactly.
Yes, right.
But when you think about that, and I'm not trying to turn this into a history lesson, but it's become part of our culture. It's become part of our culture to innovate and reward innovation. And it's part of our rich history as a country.
Right, yeah.
So patents and copyright law literally come from the U.S. Constitution. Obviously, patent law is governed by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and copyright law by the Library of Congress. And I'll get into some of these a bit deeper. The other two categories, so think of intellectual property law as an umbrella. And under that umbrella are the 4 boxes, right? We have patents and copyrights are 2 of the boxes, and those come literally from the U.S. Constitution. The third box is trademarks. Which set of federal statutes and around what time period protected U.S. trademark law? Maybe I'll finally stump her.
Was that? It was in the 1900s, right?
Yes.
Is it in 1940 something?
Oh, you are so warm. 1946, the Lanham Act.
You see, I said 40 something.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Is 40 the new 30?
That's right.
There's your headline. It was 1946, right after World War II, and this is actually, again, pretty interesting legislative history. But the Congress passed this act to protect trademarks and brands. Up until that point, trademarks and brands weren't really recognized as a valuable strategic asset. Dial forward 50, 60 years.
Oh, my word.
I mean, some of these,
Coca-Cola, IBM,
the Windows brand for AT&T.
Yeah.
I mean, some of these brands and slogans and logos and pictures and colors. I mean, Owens Corning was the first to protect a color as a trademark for, of course, the pink insulation. I mean, these are now day-to-day parts of our society. I mean, we can see a picture, we can see an animal, we can see things, and they remind us of a product. But in the early days of trademark law was still an extension of consumer protection. The courts didn't recognize it as a right of a business owner as much as it was the marking of a particular product, that if the product hurt you in some way, you would know who to sue. You know, and so it's evolved in that fashion. And the last box under the umbrella is trade secrets. Now, which set of federal laws created the trade secret laws? This is the ultimate stumper question.
Was that in the 60s?
There was no federal state secret law. So
I want a multiple choice because I would have picked that answer.
You would have picked that one.
I would have, okay.
For those of you that can't see, I'm being kicked under the table right now. So, you know, but hey, 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
I know. Well, yeah, I threw out the 60s because, you know, what the heck.
Exactly.
A lot of things happened in the 60s.
Exactly. What happened in the 60s stays in the 60s.
Well, not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah, well, we can have
Thank
a whole
goodness
show on
the
that
internet wasn't around back then.
I know.
And YouTube and stuff.
I know. I would have been in a lot more trouble than I am now.
Okay.
So trade secret laws are sort of, think of them as the residual set of intellectual property laws. If something's not a patent and it's not a trademark and it's not a copyright, is there room for protection under this kind of residual state law that varies from state to state of trade secrets? So examples of trade secrets, what's probably the most famous example of a trade secret? You mentioned the company.
AT&T?
Well, AT&T would be one, but the formula for Coca-Cola, for example, is one of the most famous trade secrets.
Right, gotcha.
It's not really a trademark. It's not a patent. It's not a copyright.
And a recent case where the secretary was going to take off with the trade secrets.
Yes, and there's some other even funnier cases. There was apparently about 10 years ago, one of the inheritors of the Coca-Cola estate was running around pickup bars saying that he knew the formula to Coca-Cola as a pickup line in singles bars. So trade secrets have been used in very interesting ways. But these are the bodies, and the reason I dwell on that is one of the first steps as a strategist that you need to go through if you're building your company around intellectual property is to know what types of things that you have as a company and under what box might they fall. And we were talking about this just before the show started. The most common way that that happens is typically through what we call an IP audit or intellectual property audit. And for those of you that are small but growing companies, you may be sitting on intellectual property assets that you don't even know you have. There's been a lot of talk lately about know-how. It's probably one of the hottest topics. A few books have been written about it. I think Ram Chandran just wrote a book about it, who I think is a wonderful author. There's been a lot of discussion about all those little sort of soft, intangible things, processes, systems, training, the things you do inside your business to make it successful that don't necessarily fit in these boxes. And how do you leverage that as an important strategic asset?
Well, even your website.
Oh,
in terms of all the different components within the website itself,
How do people navigate on the website?
Right.
What things have you done in the design of the website to sort of drive them into ordering your product or service? There's a lot of subtleties that get captured there, and I've met with hundreds of small and medium-sized companies to talk about this, and whenever we get into this topic, do you know what their first reaction is? Oh no, that's not us. IBM, AT&T, they're the big guys. Microsoft, they have all the intellectual property assets. But where do you think these companies started?
Right.
I mean, here we go. What are the assets of Microsoft? Other than a lot of cash and inventory, the assets of Microsoft, you think about it, are what? It's brands, it's algorithms, it's channels. These are the assets that make up the biggest companies and most valuable companies in the country. And I say to the small companies that are watching today, how do you take a page out of their playbook? You take IBM for a second. When we were younger, in our 30s, IBM made what? Big mainframe computers, right?
I think I was in my 20s, but
20s, okay. Well, fine. You're probably in your teens, But they were making big mainframe computers and hardware and some software. Look at IBM today. IBM today is an intellectual capital-driven company that makes a lot of money from software and consulting and leveraging their intellectual assets. Their licensing fees last year alone were $2.5 billion. Now, one thing to learn today about licensing is if you can find something in your company that you can protect from intellectual property and you can license to others, licensing is about the highest margin revenue stream you will ever see, right? Because we've learned, of course, that not every dollar of income, I think we learned this 2 shows ago on our cost savings themed show, not every dollar of income is the same amount of profitability ratio attached to it.
Right.
How do you find higher margin dollars as a way to make your company more profitable? Well, intellectual property leveraging and licensing is one of the ways to do that. Can you get people to either pay you for something that's already been created, or can you get them to pay you for things that you're currently giving away because you thought that was just good customer service? Well, that's